How often have you finished a book only to struggle to remember anything you read in it? It's a common issue, and one that drives students insane up and down the country. But I have a solution. I've developed a simple system you can use to remember anything you've read. It takes a little effort, but it's well worth it. So, without further ado, here is my 4-step system to remember everything you read. 1. The context. The first thing I do when I pick up a new book is read the cover, the back, and the chapter headings. 9 times out of 10, they make very little sense to me. But that is not the point. The point is, now I have a framework within which I can contextualize the rest of the book. Take Csikszentmihalyi's Flow, for example. His book has 10 chapters, beginning with contextualizing what flow is, then moving on to its conditions, examples of flow, and finally how flow can add meaning to your life. Being familiar with this general structure means that when I read the book, I have a narrative in my head I can slot information into. The brain loves stories. It's why from the dawn of civilization we've told lessons in the form of fables, parables, and songs. We love drama, we love excitement, and stories give that to us in droves. So when you're reading a book, even a non-fiction book, contextualize it in a narrative form. Think what story the author is trying to tell you and follow that thread. This story will be much easier to recall than the individual facts in the book, and it will mean the broad strokes of the book's contents can be retained, which is normally all you need unless you're writing a paper on the topic. And you have even more opportunity to take advantage of this if you're reading multiple books by the same author or on the same topic. Can you craft a narrative of how the author's views have changed over time? Can you tell a story about how it's responding to texts in the same area? Cling to every bit of storytelling you can, because the more information you can capture in a narrative, the easier it will be to remember. 2. Active reading. How do you let your brain know that something's worth remembering? The answer? You put cognitive effort into actively engaging with it. Say you're reading Friedrich Nietzsche's landmark text, Beyond Good and Evil. You can either read the book passively, taking the words in without asking any questions of the text and without interrogating its meaning, or you can read it actively and scour every sentence for insight, challenging anything you disagree with and effectively creating a conversation between you and Nietzsche's book. Which of these two methods do you think promotes better memorization? It's clear to see. The more active engagement you have with something, the more likely you are to remember it. This undeniably slows the pace of reading down a bit, but it's a small price to pay for what you get out of it. Each time you ask a question of the text, or connect it to other things you've read, or just give it your full, undivided, active attention, you are sending a strong signal to your brain, telling it that this is important information that it needs to hold on to. And if you notice, you've sneakily created a story in the process. By turning your reading into a conversation between you and the book, you've made a small-scale narrative that your memory can latch onto. But in order to do this, you have to let go of your ego. You will read slower using this method, and you will take longer to finish books. But who cares how many books you've got through if you can't remember the wisdom contained within their pages? This is quality of reading over quantity of reading. And the best part is, since this will make reading much more cognitively demanding, you're much more likely to enter a flow state, which will make the whole process more enjoyable. 3. Few notes, good notes. A lot of people make the mistake of writing reams of notes on basically every book they read, essentially rewriting the book in the process. This sounds like it would be really good for memorization, but nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, writing such copious notes in real time as you read often means you never hold the information in your head long enough to process it. It goes straight from the book to your notes page without rattling around in your head long enough to make an impression. Unless you desperately need those notes to look back on later, say you are doing close research for an academic paper, I recommend a different approach. Instead, at the end of each chapter, write down the 3 most important points from that chapter from memory. This accomplishes 2 things at once. First, it forces you to actively recall what was in what you just read, which improves retention. But it also makes you prioritize what you want to remember. If you get 3 key points memorized from a book chapter, you can often reconstruct the rest of the valuable information from the chapter without having to memorize it directly, and keep the 3 points reasonably general. Don't choose to note down an obscure fact or a specific example unless it's absolutely vital. Instead, write down the general principles around which the chapter is based. To return to Csikszentmihalyi's Flow, one of the chapters is on the conditions for flow. At the end of the chapter, I did not note down all the examples he gave of activities leading to flow states, but instead noted the general conditions that gave rise to flow in all these situations. That way, I can apply the information to anything I come across, rather than being limited by a set of specific examples. 4. The Memory Palace. Sherlock Holmes' master memorization technique is real, and you can use it. The Memory Palace technique is a way of storing information using a mixture of spatial location and vivid multisensory images to signal to your brain that this information is important and needs to be remembered. For instance, to remember the paraphrased Marcus Aurelius quote, "The insightful man sees beauty in all things," I use the image of Marcus Aurelius examining my friend Alan, who happens to be extraordinarily thin, with a magnifying glass, while grinning and drooling from the side of his mouth, as if he's about to eat Alan. This image encodes who said the quote, Marcus Aurelius, and its contents, looking at owl thin while finding beauty in him. I then place the image in a predetermined spot in my mental map of my house, and the process is complete. Here is how to make your own memory palace. First, choose a place you know intimately, like your own bedroom, to serve as a small memory palace. Then pick 5 points around the room to be your memory stations. Next, for each piece of information you want to memorize, come up with a vivid image for it and mentally place it in one of your stations. Then refresh the image by taking a mental walk around your palace a few times, and you're sorted. It's not that the information is now there forever, but rather that now you can go back to your memory palace and recall the information. I recommend doing this daily in the week in which you first memorize the information, and then again a few weeks later. This ensures you stay ahead of the forgetting curve and that the memory enters long-term storage. As I said before, this process is not without effort, but that's the price of remembering what you read. If it took no effort, then everyone would do it. Subscribe for more on thinking to improve your life.